We come together for a moment out of time in a place made holy by our presence, to celebrate what is deepest and most true, to honor the beauty of our own heart's longing, to cultivate wonder, imagination, and the courage to act, and to care for one another. Please light your chalice. Our common chalice is now lit.
Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of disbelieving, ours is no yet again of despair. Come yet again, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of disbelieving, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan, whoever is leaving, ours is no caravan, whoever is leaving, ours is no caravan of disbelieving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come.
Welcome to the Church of the Larger Fellowship. I'm Kevin Jago, one of your Learning Fellows. This month, our theme is blessing. And this week, Meg will talk about the challenge of finding blessings in our lives, even when we don't want to, and especially when the world is a scary place to be. Throughout this month, I invite you to reflect on the blessings in your life, whether they be people, experiences, or holy moments. Some of us are sharing our blessings online using the hashtag CLFBlessings. I invite you to share yours as well on Facebook and Twitter. As we sit at our keyboards or with mobile screens almost anywhere, we are all together. Those watching on Sunday and those who may be watching months from now, we are joined together for worship across both space and time. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever the color of your skin or your country of origin, wherever and whenever on the planet you are at this very moment, whatever your gender, however you define family, and whatever the source of your faith, you are welcome here. Come, let us worship together.
Let us now pause for a moment of deepening together as a community, for we each carry within us joys that are too great for one heart to hold, sorrows that are too much for one heart to endure, local and world events which call upon us to bear witness. Let us begin by recalling the joys, whatever you may be celebrating or whatever evokes a feeling of happiness or peace for you or for others. Now let us recall our concerns and sorrows, whatever you or the world may be holding that is in need of our healing and caring thoughts. In the heart of love and in the spirit of prayer, we give thanks for this time together, where joys can be magnified and sorrows can be lessened. Blessed be.
Let us enter into a time of awareness within ourselves and connection beyond boundaries. Connections to one another and to that interdependent web of life of which we are all, each one small thread. Here in Brooklyn, the days shorten and the leaves turn. Autumn brings our awareness to the end of summer. The earth itself prepares to rest after the fall harvest and for the approach of long winter nights. Wherever we are on the planet at this moment, it is a period of transformation from one season to the next. Wet to dry, more light, less light, dry to wet. As we breathe in, we smell change in the air. As we breathe out, we hear the sounds of life swirling all around us. We remember our relationships to one another, interwoven through breath, interwoven in purpose. May we remember those harmed by gun violence in a small church in Texas, as well as the many other places people are harmed each and every day. May we remember those harmed by ideological violence on a New York City street and in so many places each and every day. May we hold up those who have served in the armed forces, here in the United States and in so many other places around the planet. May we hold up those who have given themselves to the struggle for peace, to the dream of a world without violence. May we recall the power of community, the possibility that what comes next can be what we create together. May we recall the blessings we receive and the blessings we give throughout each and every day. As we breathe in, we remember all that is and has been. As we breathe out, we look forward to all that can be. So may it be.
So I know TED is about a lot of things that are big but I want to talk to you about something very small. So small it's a single word. The word is misfit. It's one of my favorite words because it's so literal. I mean, it's a person who sort of missed fitting in, or a person who fits in badly, or this, a person who is poorly adapted to new situations and environments. I'm a card-carrying misfit, and I'm here for the other misfits in the room because I'm never the only one. I'm going to tell you a misfit story. Somewhere in my early 30s, the dream of becoming a writer came right to my doorstep. Actually, it came to my mailbox in the form of a letter that said I'd won a giant literary prize for a short story I'd written. The short story was about my life as a competitive swimmer, and about my crappy home life, and a little bit about how grief and loss can make you insane. The prize was a trip to New York City to meet big-time editors and agents and other authors. So it was the wannabe writer's dream, right? You know what I did the day the letter came to my house? Because I'm me, I put the letter on my kitchen table, I poured myself a giant glass of vodka with ice and lime, and I sat there in my underwear for an entire day, just staring at the letter. I was thinking about all the ways I'd already screwed my life up. Who the hell was I to go to New York City and pretend to be a writer? Who was I? I'll tell you. I was a misfit, like legions of other children. I came from an abusive household that I narrowly escaped with my life. I already had 2 epically failed marriages underneath my belt. I'd flunked out of college not once, but twice, and maybe even a third time that I'm not going to tell you about. And I'd done an episode of rehab for drug use, and I'd had 2 lovely staycations in jail. So I'm on the right stage. But the real reason I think I was a misfit is that my daughter died the day she was born, and I hadn't figured out how to live with that story yet. After my daughter died, I also spent a long time homeless, living under an overpass in a kind of profound state of zombie grief and loss that some of us encounter along the way. Maybe all of us, if you live long enough. You know, homeless people are some of our most heroic misfits because they start out as us. So you see, I'd missed fitting into just about every category out there. Daughter, wife, mother, scholar. And the dream of being a writer was really kind of like a small, sad stone in my throat. It was pretty much in spite of myself that I got on that plane and flew to New York City, where the writers are. Fellow misfits, I can almost see your heads glowing. I can pick you out of a room. At first, you would have loved it. You got to choose the 3 famous writers you wanted to meet, and these guys went and found them for you. You got set up at the Gramercy Park Hotel, where you got to drink scotch late in the night with cool, smart, swank people. And you got to pretend you were cool and smart and swank, too. And you get to meet a bunch of editors and authors and agents at very, very fancy lunches and dinners. All those open hands out to me, that small, sad stone in my throat. You see, I'm trying to tell you something about people like me. Misfit people, we don't always know how to hope or say yes or choose the big thing, even when it's right in front of us. It's a shame we carry. It's a shame of wanting something good. It's a shame of feeling something good. It's a shame of not really believing we deserve to be in the room with the people we admire. If I could, I'd go back and I'd coach myself. I'd be exactly like those over 50-year-old women who helped me. I'd teach myself how to want things, how to stand up, how to ask for them. I'd say, you, You belong in the room too. The radiance falls on all of us, and we are nothing without each other. Instead, I flew back to Oregon, and as I watched the evergreens and rain come back into view, I just drank many tiny bottles of airplane Feel Sorry for Yourself. I thought about how if I was a writer, I was some kind of misfit writer. What I'm saying is I flew back to Oregon without a book deal, without an agent, and with only a head full and heart full of memories of having sat so near the beautiful writers. Memory was the only prize I allowed myself. And yet, at home, in the dark, back in my underwear, I could still hear their voices. They said, "Don't listen to anyone who tries to get you to shut up or change your story." They said, "Give voice to the story only you know how to tell." They said, "Sometimes telling the story is the thing that saves your life." Now I am, as you can see, the woman over 50. And I'm a writer. And I'm a mother. And I became a teacher. Guess who my favorite students are? Although it didn't happen the day that dream letter came through my mailbox, I did write a memoir called The Chronology of Water. In it are the stories of how many times I've had to reinvent a self from the ruins of my choices. The stories of how my seeming failures were really just weird-ass portals to something beautiful. All I had to do was give voice to the story. There's a myth in most cultures about following your dreams. It's called the hero's journey. But I prefer a different myth that's slightly to the side of that or underneath it. It's called the misfits myth. And it goes like this: even at the moment of your failure, right then, you are beautiful. You don't know it yet, but you have the ability to reinvent yourself endlessly. That's your beauty. You can be a drunk. You can be a survivor of abuse. You can be an ex-con. You can be a homeless person. You can lose all your money or your job or your husband or your wife or the worst thing of all, a child. You can even lose your marbles. You can be standing dead center in the middle of your failure, and still, I'm only here to tell you, you are so beautiful. Your story deserves to be heard because you rare and phenomenal misfit, you new species, are the only one in the room who can tell the story the way only you would. And I'd be listening. Thank you.
As we explore this theme of blessing, I want to talk about finding blessing. Finding blessing in times that perhaps don't feel particularly blessed. You know, there's that old joke about two twins. One's an optimist and one's a pessimist. And for their birthday, they get a room of horse manure. And one of them starts to cry and says, "A horse manure? Of course we get horse manure. Who wants horse manure? It's our birthday and we got horse manure." And the other one grins and starts excitedly digging through the horse manure. And somebody says, "What are you doing? Why are you digging through the horse manure?" And he says, "With all this manure here, there's bound to be a pony in there." That's an aggressive approach to finding a blessing, right? Digging through the horse manure to find that maybe a tiny little pony with a lot of horse manure. I want to talk about how we do this as a spiritual practice. when we're not optimistic, not because we just feel like it, but because we need blessing. It has been a hard time to feel blessed for me politically in this time. Every day, I feel like more people I care about are directly targeted by cruel people and policies, to lose life supports, to lose all kinds of rights, to lose health care. And it can be very easy to start going down that spiral. And frankly, to want to become part of the curse. I want to curse back. I'm angry at the people who are doing this. And so I could easily align my energy with theirs and just aim it right back at them. It's easy to do. And it's hard not to do. And in order to, at least some of the time, remember who we are, remember that we are not people who come into the world to curse others, to judge others, to blame others. We are people who come into the world to create more life, to find more love, to be with love, to be on the side of love. So how do we do that in times when it's very hard to find a blessing? One of the main groups of people to whom I've turned for wisdom and guidance are the more than 800 members of the Church of the Larger Fellowship who are incarcerated. Many of them have been incarcerated for decades, and they will be incarcerated perhaps for their whole lives. And yet they manage to find blessings. Here I am in this beautiful room with comfortable furniture and livable heat, and I could get a drink of water when I wanted, and all of these things that I take for granted. And here they are with so much less, focused on the blessing. I always think back to my first year at the Church of the Larger Fellowship. One of our ministers who we love, Amanda Aikman, was doing a class called Full Spectrum Joy with the prison members. And what they were doing is she was aligning the colors of the rainbow with traits that lead to more joy in people's lives. And I remember that the color green was associated with aligning yourself and paying close attention to something that's alive. And I was reading what the prison members of the Church of the Larger Fellowships, the people who are currently incarcerated, had written. And one of them said, "I'm in solitary confinement. There are no windows. I can't see any natural light. And I thought at first there's nothing in here but me that's alive. And then I realized there are ants on the floor. And so I spent several hours studying the behavior of the ants and aligning my life force with the energy of the ants. And I read this and I put it down, and I was in awe. I was in awe of this spiritual discipline to find the blessing, to find that tiny, tiny blessing, and to focus all of the energy there rather than the curse that really the life draining, cruel lack of life that was surrounding this person. He was choosing as an assignment, but also as a spiritual practice, to align with ants. I still would prefer that we had a different way to create justice than locking people up and throwing them in solitary confinement. At the same time, for this man who finds himself in that situation, choosing to find a blessing for himself is an act of courage and an act of survival, actually. So what kinds of difficult situations do you find yourself in? One of them I find myself in is just dealing with people who are difficult, right? I mean, we all love people theoretically, but in practicality, they can just bug us. And it's one of my practices to just not deny what's annoying me. And if it rises to the level of needing to say something about it, saying it. But as I've gotten older, I've just learned to be quiet much more about things that annoy me. I was thinking about this years ago. My mother was dying. I was in Ohio with her. I hadn't seen my 3-year-old for weeks. And so my partner and my 3-year-old were flying to Ohio for the weekend so I could see them as I stayed with my mother for almost a month. So I was very wound up. I went to the airport to pick him up. I was super wound up, and I pulled up, and I'm picking up a mom and a 3-year-old, and there's this man, and he's like, you can't park there. And this was before I had a smartphone. This was a while ago. And I said, well, I need to find out if the plane's on time. And he said, well, you can't park there and find out if the plane's on time. And so I drove around the big loop, and I came back, and they still weren't there. And I was trying to figure out, what was going on. And so he said, you can't, again, I stopped the car just for a second. I was going to get out. And he said, you cannot leave the car there. And I looked at him and I thought, here is a man who cares a lot about the airport running smoothly. So if I align myself with his desire that the airport works out smoothly instead of going against it, maybe we could get somewhere. So I said to him, I'm so sorry. I can see that, I'm really upsetting the airport here. And I get it. And by the way, it was this tiny airport. There was nothing going on there. There was no crowd. There was no reason in the world for this to be happening. So part of me wanted to say to him, what is wrong with you? How would it hurt anything if I parked here for 2 minutes? But I knew that wouldn't work with him. So I said instead, I can see that you care so much about this airport running well, and so do I. And here's the thing, my 3-year-old is coming on a plane. We haven't seen each other in weeks. My mother's dying. And I don't know what happened to the plane. And I'm just a nervous wreck. But I don't know if I should park or leave or, what I should do. And he turned into my best helper ever. He said, you keep driving and come back, and I'll go find out what happened to the plane. He got the information about it. When I came back around, he knew, how late it was. And he suggested a restaurant I could go to cool my heels and get a cup of coffee. And he became my ally in this. And he became my ally because I found the blessing in what he was doing. I saw that he was trying to bless the airport. That's where his energy was going. He wanted that little airport in Akron, Ohio, to really run like a top. And when I could align myself with his sense of blessing and acknowledge that blessing, suddenly we were a team. I remember that, and I name it from years ago because often we don't get to that place with people, right? That was kind of like watching a miracle. And there are, maybe 5 or 6 of those moments with strangers I can think of in my life. But if we can find a way instead to see what is the blessing that this person who's annoying me is trying to bring into the world, and how can I bless their blessing while at the same time letting them know where I fit into this. As we move towards Thanksgiving weekend in the United States, when many of us will see family members, this idea of finding the blessing and looking for what other people are trying to bless could help us. So as we live through this month, I invite you to the spiritual practice of looking for blessings, looking hard, digging through the manure, finding the blessing. And now we come to that time in our service when we extinguish the flames that we've lit for this special time set apart. But never do we extinguish the flame that burns eternal, the flame of love, the flame of our commitment to a just and caring world. If you carry that flame, please touch your heart and say to yourself, I carry the flame, and allow that flame to burn bright.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, yeah, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I got the light of peace and love, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, I got the light of peace and love, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, I got the light of peace and love, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, all in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. All in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I got the light of freedom, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, the light of freedom, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, I got the light of freedom, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Shine, 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 shine. Shine, just let it shine. Yeah, shine, 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 shine. Shine, just let it shine. Yeah, shine, 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 shine. Shine, just let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine.
Thank you.